don't leave reality behind when we come here. Some of you saw my commentary this week. It was a little bit different than I have normally done, but those of you who didn't, I want to share it with you. These were a different sort of set of thoughts that I had after the horrendous attack on the folks who were marching in Boulder. And I don't know if you all realize, they've been doing this for 80 weeks. This was just a small group of people who were committed each week to this very modest display of concern for the hostages, simply saying that they would like these people brought home. And that, of course, is when this monster decided to end all Zionists, in his words. In the face of hatred, this is how we go on. We were born more than 3,000 years ago in the land of Israel. Ever since then, they have tried to scatter us, to silence us, to burn us down. But we have endured. Not through miracles, not through religious faith. Our beliefs may be the least unifying thing about us. We have survived because we have always known that we are a people, a family with a shared story. We have preserved our story in remembrances and texts and in holidays and traditions. We have called upon our story in times of joy and in times of great sorrow. From one generation to the next, l'dor vador, we have passed our story on, raising our children with the memory of where we come from and the hope of where we're going. We have taught them that they are part of something larger, something both ancient and unfinished. We have survived because we are a people. We have survived because we are a family. Not always an easy one, frequently an argumentative one, but still one. The Jewish people has endured because what holds us together is the most human force of all, love. It is the kind of love that only a family can know, that forgives and fights and shows up anyway, that knows we belong to one another even when we do not see eye to eye. This is because, above all, it is the kind of love that remembers and refuses to forget, that mixes grief and hope in the same breath, that resists and never despairs, and always, always rebuilds. The Jewish people is one of the world's oldest families, one of its most resilient, and one of its strongest. This is how we traveled so far down the path of human history, and this is how we will go on, together. Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel lives. So we'll continue, Arthur, with the first slide. Arthur had to relocate up here tonight because the projector is acting up. Light has long been our people's symbol of hope and renewal, a reminder that even in darkness we hold the power to bring light into our lives and the world. We welcome Shabbat with light, filling our homes and communities with warmth and peace and a sense of purpose. May the glow of our Shabbat candles remind us of the strength we carry within and the responsibilities we share with one another. May their light bring joy to our hearts and clarity to our minds. As the flames rise, may they inspire us to act with courage, compassion, and urgency, bringing light to those who need it most. And I'd like to invite Gail and Mike Whitty to light the candles. As they do, I'll share our readers tonight are Miriam Jairus, Rabbi Miriam Jairus, Jennifer Kurland, Deanne Safer, Deborah Shanker, and Barry Safer. Baruch ha'or ba'olam. Rabbi Miriam Jarris makes her way to the Bima. Have I ever mentioned we've got a little fun going to fix that sound system? Yes, I have, I believe.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
As the week slips behind us, we open the door to Shabbat, inviting its calm and beauty into our lives. Shabbat does not come to us from beyond, but it is something we create, a time to pause, to breathe, to find joy in one another's company and meaning in a shared experience. By gathering on Shabbat, we transform the ordinary into something extraordinary. In this time, we celebrate the tradition of rest and renewal, softening the burdens of the week and strengthening the connections we share. Let us embrace the Shabbat that we create together as a community, joining our people throughout the world. Okay.
To cross the threshold of this room on Shabbat is to enter a place free from the demands of our everyday lives. We step away from our daily routines in an attempt to gain perspective on where we have been and where we are going. At other times, in other places, we may feel fragile and alone. Yet here, we join together to find strength, to build community as we look with wonder at the universe and seek our place within its vastness. To this place, we come to lengthen our perspective.
To this place we come to question and explore.
In this place, we awaken our imaginations.
In this place we draw strength as we allow ourselves to dream.
Together, we share the challenge of an ever-changing world, a world often beyond our control. Together, we seek to find meaning, calm our anxieties, understand our purpose. Together, we share the burdens and blessings of responsibility. Together, we bond as a community, a true gift of Shabbat.
We spend our days searching for meaning, for wisdom, for direction to guide us forward. We look to the world around us, to teachers, to history, and to the voices of our ancestors.
We ask, how do we find the courage to face the future? We ask, how do we choose which path to take? We ask, how do we do these things while remaining true to ourselves?
What we seek is closer than we think, the spark of understanding, the source of hope, the clarity to choose the right path. These live within us, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be embraced. Shabbat is a time to pause and gather our strength. It is a time to think about who we are and what we can make of our lives. On Shabbat, we take a moment to set aside the noise, the distractions, and the demands of the week. Shabbat invites us to return to ourselves and contemplate the questions that our lives are posing.
As we enter this, sorry.
It's okay.
Stepping on your lines.
As we enter this special time, let us accept the invitation to open our hearts, quiet our doubts, and remember this.
The capacity for wisdom, for courage, and for discernment is already here inside us. Look within yourself, you'll find it there. There's a place with wisdom that can guide us. There's a place where we know what's right or wrong. Where's the path to peace that we all long for? Yesh makom betokenu. Yesh makom betokenu. Look within yourself, you'll find it there.
So said the ancient Jewish philosopher Kohelet. I applied my mind to know and search out, to seek understanding and an explanation of things. I sought to find words of delight and what is correctly written. I sought words of truth. Understanding is a greater stronghold to the wise than 10 rulers that are in a city. Blessed are those who seek words of truth. Out of the universe, source of our lives, we develop the power of mind and its quest for life's meaning. Yet knowledge is not received as a gift. We must search it to attain understanding. Hey.
We are all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically. There's as many atoms in a single molecule as your DNA as there are stars in the typical galaxy. We are, each of us, a little universe. Carl Sagan put it this way: the cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself.
Peace is more than the absence of conflict. It is the presence of justice, compassion, and hope. It does not arrive on its own. It must be nurtured through the strength to stand firm in our convictions and the willingness to seek understanding. True peace begins within. It calls us to care for ourselves and our community, to ensure that we are grounded and secure. But it cannot remain there. Peace reaches outward, finding life in the connections we build and the shared commitments to a world where dignity and fairness prevail. Peace is not passive. It grows from the small acts of courage and kindness that sustains us and the choices we make, even when the path is uncertain. It asks us to see the humanity in one another and to believe that even in difficult times, we can shape a better future. May we pursue peace with purpose, bringing light to our lives and to the world we share.
Na'aseh shalom ba'olam, na'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'akol ba'olam be'iru shalom. Na'aseh shalom ba'olam, shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol ha'olam be'iru shalom, shalom. Na'aseh shalom ba'olam, na'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol ha'olam be'iru shalom. Na'aseh shalom ba'olam, shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol ha'olam be'iru shalom, shalom.
In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, our well wishes are extended to these beloved members of our community, to Lee Bricker, to Saul Foreman, and Jim Walker, together with anyone whom you'd like to mention this evening. We'll go around the room. Yes, Jerry?
Pamela A.
Miriam?
Rabbi Sharon.
Lonnie? Did you have somebody? No? Anybody on this here? Anybody else here? Over here? Yes, Hal? Jason?
Jeffrey, Nancy Owens, and Ken Hendricks.
Did we miss anyone at all? May all who suffer know that they are not alone, that we are there. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, a refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits. Today is the 609th day of captivity and the 88th Shabbat for the hostages who remain in Gaza. May those who continue to endure captivity find the courage to carry on. May those who love them not despair of their return. May they soon emerge from their confinement, whole in body and in spirit, to know once again the embrace of loved ones.
מקום הכוח בתוכנו, מקורות הברכה מעברותינו. May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Shalom. Mekom hakoach betochenu, mekorot habracha mi'evrotenu. May those in need of healing know refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Shalom.
Because he loves you and he wants to be with you.
I just like to look at all of you. I got a promotion. I started to make the call. Then I remembered. I got sick and didn't know what to do. I started to make the call. Then I remembered. I forgot what that Yiddish expression meant. I started to make the call. Then I remembered. I wanted your recipe. I started to make the call. Then I remembered. Good news, bad news, wisdom and guidance. I started to make the calls, but then I remember. We aren't out there. You aren't out there. You aren't going to answer. You're in my heart. I'll always remember. And we'll always remember those we've loved, won't we? Yeah. Yes, we will.
Okay, well, I'm missing a page, but I think you know what comes next. We've had all kinds of technical problems. But it doesn't really matter because we're together. And this is the time when we call to mind, here it is. Put in the wrong order. This is the time when we turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones and those whom our friends and neighbors have lost. The martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death, as we recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us. Those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, those include these members of our community and their loved ones, whose yahrzeits we observe. David Ben-Ami, Benjamin Dennenberg, Harry Fraser, Henry Friedenberg, Evelyn Goff, Ida Krohn, Xenia Lakowitz, Sam Meza, Abraham Meisner, Gussie Meyerson, Irving Pinkney, and Eugene Scala. If there's someone whose name you'd like to mention, whom you're remembering tonight, again, we'll go around the room. Anybody on this side?
My grandfather, Jacob Always.
Thank you. Anybody? Yes, Jason.
Tim Kafka, my uncle.
Anybody else? We say, Yehi Zichram Livracha. May their memories be a blessing. May each time we do remember, we have a moment not only of sadness, but of joy. And now Arthur will go backwards a slide, and we will all together rise, if you can do so comfortably, and recite our humanistic interpretation of Kaddish. Nitzgadal, v'nitzkadash, beruach ha'adam. Let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our shared humanity. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it. Let's claim the freshness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us each in our own way take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May justice and peace permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth. And let us say, Ken Yehi, may it be so. Please be seated. Okay, I think probably the best thing to do is to just turn it off. No, I think that's the focus. Yeah, that's not going to do it. Just maybe push, there we go. Push it again. Okay. Yes.
I just want to mention also at the website, those who died on D-Day.
Oh yes, today is D-Day. Thank you. Today is D-Day. Today is D-Day. One of the greatest and most horrible moments in the history of the world. D-Day. D-Day, yes. People look at me quizzically. I know they know what D-Day is because they didn't hear me. Today is D-Day. It is the greatest generation, indeed. The technical difficulties have obviously extended to my eyes and my tongue as well. But at one point in my career here, I was flappable, and now I've become more unflappable. So I'm able to rise above these things. But one more, and I probably won't. In any case, that's all right. So I just want to mention a few things. The Oneg tonight, just in case I forget to mention, Socrates Society is sponsoring it. We don't see them around here anymore because once they went on Zoom, they just Zoomed. But they still Zoom with our links, and we still publicize them, and I'm still happy they're an ongoing sort of affiliate of our congregation. I also want to remind you about the schedule. I will be gone for 2 weeks, but I believe next week, tell me if I'm wrong, is when we'll be showing that wonderful movie, To Be or Not to Be. If it's not next week, it's the week after, and it is all correct in the newsletter. Whereas many of the things that I say should never be relied upon. And that goes for all kinds of things, by the way. All kinds of things, as my daughters will readily tell you. So I'll be back, I believe we're back for the Shabbat on the 27th. And I don't remember what I'm talking about. Then I do. I'm going to be speaking, I think, about post-denominationalism in Judaism. Very interesting topic that's going around. Where do we fit in with all of that? We'll talk about how the movement's developed and what's been going on in the Jewish world these days as that's become less and less important. We'll have a lot of other interesting things coming up as well. In July, I'll be traveling a little bit. We'll have some time off for the Independence Day. And then I believe in August, we're going to screen the film, and you're the first to know about this. We're going to screen the film October 8th. If you haven't heard about this important documentary, you can take a quick look about it. It's basically about the reaction to October 7th in this country and how it set loose this demon of anti-Semitism that we're now dealing with, and indeed on both sides. And that, of course, is part of our topic tonight. So over the past few weeks, we have been inundated with so much news, so much of it tragic and harmful and hurtful, competing for our attention and our emotional clarity. We've witnessed the rise in anti-Semitic violence, the murder of that young couple in Washington, the firebombing of a peaceful protest asking simply to return hostages, something that transformed a moment of solidarity into an act of terror. Attempts to separate these attacks from anti-Semitism have, I must add, as I have been regularly, become almost comical. Despite the attackers echoing pro-Hamas campus and street slogans like "Free, Free Palestine," "Globalize the Intifada," "Intifada Revolution, it's the only solution," or some such rhyme. I think all of us know what the Intifadas were. They were mass killings of Jews in the 1980s and the 2000s. Even before these recent horrible attacks, the federal government had begun to address the violent campus rhetoric and the encampments, making arrests, seeking to deport a number of international students accused of crossing legal, and in the cases where visa conditions were violated, also ethical lines, as they spread pro-Hamas Jew hatred under the guise of pro-Palestinian advocacy. These federal actions, not all of them, as I think we're aware, are strictly about anti-Semitism, but they have certainly, as we can all agree, radically changed the relationship between this current administration and many of our universities. Their actions have included canceling all foreign student visas at Harvard, freezing over $3 billion in funding there, and canceling research contracts as well there at Columbia and other universities. Some consider this long overdue accountability for these institutions that, and I agree with this, have long ignored the anti-Semitism. Others consider it a civil liberties crisis, and in fact it may be a little bit of each. Now, I know some have speculated on the motives, and I've heard a lot of that because I get the emails from you and I get the texts. But I note that some of the actions, some, not all, are supported by Democrats as well. It's not a partisan issue, as I have strongly argued that fighting anti-Semitism must not and cannot be. So as I'm going to go through this tonight, I'm not going to speculate on motivations, not because it is illegitimate to do so, but because I prefer to stay away from what has become this partisan talking point, especially when there is support that crosses party lines. Now, tonight instead, I want to talk more about the policies themselves and raise some of the Jewish, the ethical, and the constitutional questions that I'm sure we're all thinking about. Now, I'm not going to be able to really add anything to the discussion about whether they are effective or not, because number one, they haven't been evaluated and we don't know yet. And number two, I think this is really more about raising the concerns about whether what's actually being accomplished addresses things far beyond anti-Semitism, and those things I can't say whether they're legitimate or whether they indeed address those issues either. We're all familiar by this time with the tactics that are being employed, deporting certain individuals who are not citizens, defunding universities, the cancellation of visas. They are distinct tactics. Immigration law is not education policy, but they share broad implications for speech, academic freedom, and the limits of protest, even protest that advocates violence. So I propose that we should all be thinking about these questions. Where is the line between education and indoctrination? I may not answer these questions tonight, but these are things that we should be thinking about as a people, as a nation. When does speech become threat? Great deal of misunderstanding about what our Constitution has to say about that. What enforcement is constitutional? And finally, what are our First Amendment obligations to non-citizens, to residents and guests? Of course, I can't address all of these tonight. We would be here, well, we'd be here till next Shabbat, and I'm going on vacation Sunday, so that's not going to happen. But I hope to offer at least a meaningful start. This talk began with a thoughtful congregant's request, who spoke to me about LA-based Rabbi Sharon Brous's widely shared sermon way back in Purim, warning that Jews are being used as political pawns, and it's a concern many have echoed. Her framing resonated, but of course not all agree either. Even those sympathetic to her critique, though, acknowledge that despite flaws and inconsistencies, some policies do seem justified. And I'll return to that. First, let me begin with a slight legal clarification about who's affected with these immigration actions to start with. And then we're going to look at the government's campaign regarding the universities, and finally, the range of Jewish responses that I've encountered. I'll conclude with my own humanistic Jewish perspectives, offering you some thoughts. Obviously, as humanists, whatever I say is up to you to take all or part or none of. I can't, of course, promise that I'm going to offer useful answers, but I do believe that we have this obligation to think about it. And that obligation is anchored in our dual commitments to the Jewish people on one hand, and to the Enlightenment and American values of justice, of truth, and reason on the other. But these are not just national stories, and they're not just political stories, they're also personal stories, and they're personal for us too, because we are the target of so much of the hatred. What kind of society, we must ask, do we want to live in? Which of the values will we go to the mat for? What kind of Jewish voice, particularly considering our centrality in this debate, can we offer? Let's begin with the detentions and the visa revocations, some of the most immediate and the most emotionally charged of all of the developments. There's an important legal distinction between two groups of non-citizens, and I'm sure you're aware of it, but just to set the table. On one hand, we do have student visa holders, and on the other, legal permanent residents, LPRs they call them, but we usually refer to them as green card holders. In short, green card holders can be deported under usual circumstances only for serious criminal or national security reasons. Visa holders, including student visa holders on the other hand, are subject to removal for even administrative violations. So in the case of student visa holders, this would include, for instance, failure to be enrolled full-time as a student, taking unauthorized work. They have pretty strict restrictions on that, and all kinds of other conditions. Such violations can trigger deportation, and there's really no recourse or very limited recourse. Green card holder, on the other hand, can live, I use that expression a lot, I'm sorry, I was writing it and didn't realize it. Well, they can live, as we know, and work in the US almost as if they were citizens. So deporting them generally requires proof of significant wrongdoing, though that, by the way, and it figures into one of the cases I'm going to mention, does include lying on the initial application for a visa that got them here in the first place. So both types of residents here in our country, guests and long-term permanent residents, have been in the news. Famously, Mahmoud Khalil. He's a Palestinian-born grad student, a green card holder, who was detained a few months ago under a Cold War-era provision of the 1952 Immigration and Nationality Act. This allows deportation if the Secretary of State determines that someone poses potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences. That's a quote. Khalil has received due process. At first it was not clear, because there had been criminal cases where that was not the case. But in these cases, particularly in the two that I'm going to discuss about green card holders, that has occurred. He recently appeared before a federal judge who, though he expressed, the judge did, some skepticism about the administration of this 1952 law, which I personally didn't understand, the skepticism, he nevertheless ruled that Khalil's deportation could and should proceed based on evidence that emerged that he had lied on his original visa application about his support for and ties with U.S. recognized terrorist organizations. Personally, I believe his deportation was justified. Personal opinion. Mohsen Mandawi is another that has made headlines. He's a green card holder as well. He made headlines specifically because he was detained right before or during a citizenship interview. He too was held under the 1952 Act, but he too received due process and has since been released on bond. I believe he's in Vermont right now. Among other allegations, he has been credibly accused, and this is something that is, of course, determined or part of the determination that the Secretary of State makes under the 1952 law. He's been credibly accused of looking around to purchase a gun, which he was not entitled to do, and to telling a gun shop owner that years earlier he used to kill Jews in Palestine. He was obviously unable to purchase that gun, but if the allegations like this, and there are others, are substantiated, I would personally support his removal as well. Rumeysa Öztürk raises other issues. She's not a green card holder. She's a Turkish student visa holder who was deported after writing a BDS, pro-BDS, boycott, yeah, you know what I'm talking about, the sanctions and so forth of Israel. And DHS, as a result, alleged Hamas ties, though no public evidence was offered on that count. But as a visa holder, she had fewer rights. And I suppose that if these were credible, and I do not know at this point, there would be legitimation for her removal as well. That's where I stand on that. Now, there are, of course, those who view this as routine enforcement, while others see it as retaliation, and I believe it's someplace in between. What I was most concerned about, and I had conversations with some of you in this regard, was that there would be and must be due process, particularly in the case of those who have green cards. They are, I believe, unequivocally, in most cases, entitled to full protection of free speech under the Constitution. But there are these exceptions, and this law has been upheld. Even though, as it has produced some support in the Jewish community, it's also created discomfort, deep discomfort, for many American Jews. We who are usually quick to notice overreach. And that's one of the concerns I've heard from many of you, and I share it. Deborah Lipstadt, you'll recall, I think most of you know her name, is one of the most respected scholars of anti-Semitism I wrote the country, but in the entire world. She served as President Biden's envoy in that regard, and she's recently addressed this tension. She affirms that visa revocations are legitimate when legal standards are met. For example, lying on applications, she cited that, but insists, as I have said, that they be handled transparently, fairly, and with due process as necessitated by the law. And she and I agree on this because we also view that protest, even when offensive, must be distinguished from criminal behavior. And that is the area that I think overlaps with these particular deportations. Jonathan Greenblatt, the very able, I believe, head of the ADL, made a similar point. He initially supported Khalil's detention, but later insisted that constitutional norms must be protected, and that Khalil was indeed, and the ADL supported this, entitled to due process. These are not just theoretical debates, obviously, but I want to remind you of something. They're also not new. And this is something I wanted to emphasize because we have personal experience with this at our congregation. Many of you remember being part of the effort to support the Syrian refugee family some years ago, the Kados, who had applied here for asylum. They had legal residence. They were on a special visa. The father was later discovered, though, to have expressed support for ISIS online. and he was removed. His deportation proceedings, however, did not begin during the first Trump administration. They began under President Obama's administration. And I think it's important for us to remember that these are not brand new things that are falling out of the sky upon us. Because sometimes we have a little bit of a tendency to also be partisan and to forget that there are continuations from administration to administration. The family was only here because there was a technicality in their status. The little baby, I think there were 4 children, had been born in a displaced persons camp in Turkey and was considered stateless. So mom and the children were allowed to remain here, and that's where we stepped in to help them, hoping that they would eventually gain asylum. We learned from that this always carries an emotional and material, emotional sort of damage. And I think we all remember the love we had for this family. In the end, they were reunited, and I hate to tell you, it wasn't a happy story, because the father indeed had been radicalized, and it led to a great deal of suffering from the children. This week, visa scrutiny, though, as the type that we saw here, surfaced again when Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that foreign student applicants would also now be assessed, as he was as an asylum seeker, on their social media presence. And some have already been denied for hiding or for lacking such accounts, which may be a problem, but I guess the expectation is that all young people have them. Again, the same kind of review that was applied to asylum seekers is now being transferred, but it is not illegal. In any case, the core issue isn't whether immigration law should be enforced, it's how we enforce it. And I think that as Americans, we should come to some agreement that it has to be done wisely and as much in accordance with our values and our Constitution, which is the expression of our values, as we can. So let me now switch over to the other topic. The other topic that doesn't really have anything to do with education policy either, but is all about education policy now, which is the government's growing confrontation with our universities. It began with the freezing of over $2 billion in federal funding to Harvard. Since then, the Trump administration has canceled additional monies, proposed revoking Harvard's tax-exempt status, and launched federal audits of all kinds. And what is the justification? Well, it's a mix of allegations. I think there has been some clarity here, that this is not all in the name of battling anti-Semitism, because we know that they are also concerned about ideological bias, both in admissions and in the faculty, what they call the necessity of viewpoint diversity. And all my cards on the table, you've heard me speak about this, I find some sympathy with these arguments in certain areas of our universities. These latter two, though, having nothing to do with anti-Semitism, are familiar to us, because these long-standing criticisms of what's become known in this country as DEI have been out there for close to a decade now. Well, in any case, this week, the total impact on Harvard surpassed that $3 billion that I mentioned. And it has come to include a lot of important research projects, which are now paused or restructures. Now, the media has, by and large, and we Jews have done it too because we have personal interest in this, we have maybe ignored some of these other arguments that the administration and that just the situation in our country have said, the DEI parts and the viewpoint bias. And unfortunately, though, the media, which has a responsibility to taking it beyond just the Jewish world, has focused very much on anti-Semitism. And I want to emphasize that because the Jews are not being claimed as the reason for all this, not by the Trump administration. They've been clear about that. But the press has not always reported that, and they have made this all about anti-Semitism. Both are true, and I think that's led to what, clearly you'll hear me argue this in a moment, is this overreach. I am deeply, deeply troubled and alarmed by the rising anti-Semitism. And so I accept that there needs to be some kinds of reforms. I understand the impulse for tough measures. You've heard I already support some things. But many elements of this, particularly those things that seem to go well beyond fighting anti-Semitism, the harassment of Jewish students, you know, that Harvard report revealed a real nightmare for them, those kids. I mean, this was not a short report. And I recognize, by the way, just as an American, this bias and how it affects Israel and how it affects the Jewish story, the Jewish narrative. But there is a difference between targeted correction and overreach. And I believe that a lot of this is overreach, and perhaps even dangerously so. It raises questions like this. What does medical research funding have to do with anti-Semitic bias or with anti-Israel bias in a sociology class or an English class? Yes, that's there. And I believe that's indisputable now. But those are not the funds that are being withheld. And that's something of concern. Canceling cancer research is not going to fix the radicalization of a history department or a Near East history department. Harvard President Alan Garber stated this: no government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. And that's a fair statement, though I would say to Dr. Garber that there are fields of study and other university activities that taxpayers are funding, which do demand public scrutiny. I've already now mentioned them 3-4 times, and accountability, even from private universities. But his larger point stands. Just ask the 160 Israeli students at Harvard who are now unsure about their future because of the blanket visa cancellations. This is overreach. This is the use of a club instead of a scalpel. And I don't mean that in a solely metaphorical way, because it's real. There are models, including one that just was issued by this administration, of ways that the federal government can employ the scalpel, can say this but not this. We're not going to hurt pediatric cancer studies. We are going to look at what the Columbia University and Harvard University report said with regard to the intimidation of Jewish students. And that is something the Justice Department did this week, so they know how to do it. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, it's because, again, it did not receive the attention in the mass media that it deserved. Perhaps it wasn't radical enough. It was simply the decision of the Justice Department, which it has done in the past in other cases where racism and other kinds of discrimination were present on campuses, to report to the Accreditation Bureau of the Board of the Universities in this country that Columbia University is being investigated by the federal government for violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits universities from receiving federal funding when there is discrimination present and not being dealt with in a way that the federal government can avoid an investigation. That's the way you do it. Now, the federal government's not going to tell the Accreditation Board what to do. They're simply informing them of a reality, and it's a reality that's been used before. That is how, if you care about the Jewish students for real, you do this. That's how, if you care about anything, you do this, legally, within the bounds of the law. All right, so I know you know, because we have all had a meeting of the minds, and we're all in 100% agreement on everything that Jeff has said tonight. Oh, I can see everybody's nodding. Some couple of people are nodding. Some people are shaking their heads vigorously, slightly, at an angle. Kathy's going at an angle. No, she's going vigorously right to left. But I think you agree with me on the overreach. This is clearly overreach. I think we know that. But of course, as usual, Jews are not of one mind on this. There was recently a symposium at the Center for Jewish History. That's a big think tank. called The End of an Era, Jews and Elite University. And these divides were on blatant display there. On one hand, we had a man named Bill Ackerman. You may or may not know who he is. He's a billionaire. He's also a very, very activist Jew. And he's defending the administration's crackdown as necessary in every way. Deborah Lipstadt, however, pushed back. She warned that using anti-Semitism as a political wedge can undermine civil society. And understand, she's not naive. And I have more or less taken my cue from what I think is acceptable from listening to her. Because she's not naive about this. Deborah Lipstadt was recently offered a position, a teaching position at Columbia University. Did you hear about this? She declined. She was already beginning to receive threats from students there and faculty. She feared that this atmosphere of anti-Semitism and the university's real failures to react to it would, in a sense, make the position untenable for her. She couldn't do it to herself and those she loved. And she also feared that her presence would serve as a fig leaf, her words, masking the institution's inadequate actions. I don't know how much you followed what happened. The takeover of Hamilton Hall, for example. The Butler Library takeover. Do you know that there are 2 black janitors who were working there who were held hostage that night? Have you heard this? Yeah. 2 men who were working in Hamilton Hall. They are suing the university, and they have claimed that this reminded them of the Klan. They have no part in this anti-Semitism argument. But they were abused throughout that night. But Deborah Lipstadt, getting back to her, having expressed this real apprehension about potential harassment and so forth, and questioning whether or not the university could provide a safe and open environment, even academically speaking, warned that the Trump administration's overreach could ultimately hollow out the very institutions that have long supported Jewish life and free inquiry. Jonathan Greenblatt agreed at that same conference. He said, threatening to cut off all federal funding to a university doesn't help Jews. Doesn't help anyone, I'd add. It helps people who want to undermine liberal education and elite institutions. And he said that's probably the point. They're right. These are the folks I agree with. These are the folks I've been taking my cue from. Jewish safety matters, but it can't be used as an excuse for sweeping repression. Reasonable critique of academic imbalance matters, but the same goes. There are ways to have a conversation with our institutions of higher education, even to take action. Title VI action, for example. But this, shutting it down, shutting it all down, that's not going to fly. Not in our democratic society. Not in a society that values enlightenment, the Enlightenment and the way that it helped produce our Constitution. So where does this all leave us? Well, mostly I think with questions, not black and white questions, not questions with black and white answers, they're nuanced. As I've done tonight, I've tried at least a little bit. Those questions include, can we hold more than one truth? Can we call out anti-Semitism among both students and faculty while rejecting overreaching, overbroad, and arguably authoritarian responses? Can we implement changes within the structure of law, whether it's the deportation and residency and green card and visa law, or it's how we approach free speech and academic freedom, which are part of our value system, without surrendering our freedoms, because those freedoms are what make that change possible. In the end, I can't tell any of you, nor would I dare tell any of you, how much justification to see or not see. I can just let you know where I am, and I think I've tried to anyway, shared some of my thinking. I'm sure a lot of you will be discussing this with me. long into, well, perhaps not tonight, but into the summer and the fall, but not during my vacation, which starts on Sunday. But honestly, no matter where we fall on these arguments, I really want us as a community of humanistic Jews, a Jewish community of American Jews, a community of American Jews, I want us to remain in this argument, solidly in this argument. And that's going to mean seeing this always through both our distinctly American and Jewish lenses. Our considerations are deeply Jewish, and they must be. As Jews, we see the very real threats to Jewish students and increasingly the entire American Jewish community. And we are right to want action. As Americans, and in our case, American humanists, devoted to the classical, liberal, Enlightenment values that shape our nature, our considerations are also deeply rooted in our defense of those constitutional principles, chiefly justice and truth. This means we also know that protecting ourselves as Jews cannot come at the cost of betraying those freedoms, because they protect everyone. As humanistic Jews, we have learned through experience, and we must continue to make every attempt to engage this, as we do all issues, with complexity, to avoid solutions to our problems that silence dissent or that mistake vengeance for justice. Like many challenges we've all faced as Jews, as humanistic Jews, as Americans in the past, but particularly as Jews, we are not on an easy path here. And we didn't put ourselves on this path. It's the path that, as Jews, we often find ourselves placed upon by others. And then, in the quandary of trying to self-protect and balance the values that we hold dear, both Jewish and Enlightenment and constitutional and everything else, well, here we are. And there's not a whole lot we can do about it. It is the situation. And so we have no choice but to navigate it together, and the hope that what we advise and what we support helps our governments, and there will be others, make wise choices for both the American and the Jewish future. This, folks, is the path that we've been placed on. And just like all of those others throughout Jewish history that I mentioned in the poem that I shared with you at the beginning, we have no choice but to walk it together. So let's do it with as much clarity, as much honesty, and as much courage as we can. So those are my thoughts. I know some of you will share yours during the Oneg Shabbat, and probably for months to come. Arthur, can you get that thing going again? I see the faintest glow of the word presentation appearing. There we go. I'm tempted at some points just to go back to the Rudy Valley thing with the megaphone, and let's just leave it at that, and maybe put some stone tablets up here with the service on it. But no, we have this great technology, and sometimes it even works. Maestro. This is a song we haven't done for a while. Ezra Donner wrote this, by the way. Ezra Donner.
Behold how good it is when people dwell together,
Joseph for the beautiful music, David for streaming for us, Arthur for the slides. Thanks to all of you. Shabbat Shalom.